Okay, moving on. Our main story tonight is resignation. No, not the type that makes you happy because of a personal vendetta and commitment to justice. The other definition of the word, the acceptance of something undesirable but inevitable, as in, Urban Meyer accepted the host's weekly jokes at his expense with resignation. It's the feeling that comes after you've cared so much about something for so long that you're unable to give even one more because what's the point? That's where I found myself at the end of last week. News that Washington had claimed Reuben Foster just 3 days after he was cut from the 49ers due to a domestic violence arrest, his second since April, broke on Tuesday. And I'll be honest, I was kind of relieved it would be old news by the time we had a show to do. But then on Friday, TMZ published a video of Chiefs running back Kareem Hunt getting into a physical altercation with a woman in a hotel where he was living at the time, and they said it happened in February, and I honestly couldn't remember if I knew that one already or not. In the past, when these stories would break, I'd be filled with this anger and determination to use my platform and speak truth to power, all that stuff women are told we have the capacity and responsibility to do. But this time, I was just tired. Obviously, I knew I had to watch the video that just dropped, and so I did. I watched the Thank You Next video. Twice. Very convenient, they dropped at the same time. And then I got back to working on a monologue about sneaker culture because I have a job to do and I cannot just derail that every time someone in sports drops the ball on this stuff. I'm sick of it. And I feel guilty about being sick of it. And then I feel guilty about feeling guilty. I was raised Catholic, it's a whole thing. I went back and forth on whether or not I would have to do this again with the little time I get for this show. But as I saw all the stories and reactions pop up on my timeline, I didn't feel personally invested in them like I did before. I wouldn't say I was numb, because even numbness feels like something. It was more like watching a movie I don't even like for the dozenth time. I knew what was coming next. I could call the play before they ran it, and it probably impressed the people around me right up until it got annoying. I was like an off-the-field issues version of Tony Romo. A few days after Washington signed Foster, a team executive did an interview with a local radio station. If we're following the usual script here, he's supposed to handle that with all the grace of a newborn foal walking across a frozen pond. So let's go ahead and see how he did.
So basically what you're doing here, you're taking a high-risk chance, and the high risk was the beat up that, we're going to take from a PR. We understood that from a PR standpoint, and we're taking it. We got people who are in high places that has done far worse if you look at it realistically, and they're still up there. So at the same, this is small potatoes to a lot of things out there.
Small potatoes. I can think of exactly one situation in which calling something small potatoes would be the less offensive option, and it would be when you're talking about Redskins. So, okay, again, after that, we all know the next step, an apology. And you know how when you go see a band that's been touring forever, you hope they play the hits? Well, this is one of the rare times I was hoping they'd try out some of their new stuff. They didn't.
I want to apologize to the organization, my wife, my mom, my sisters, and the 6 daughters that I have. I really, the last night or so been real tough on me from an emotional standpoint, because never in my life that I've said anything so insensitive as, I've said, and, I'm not going to sit here and make excuses, because there is no excuses. And like I said, I got 6 daughters. There's nowhere in the world that I would tolerate anything like that. So for me to just say something like that, just want to apologize.
Yeah, that's Doug Williams, the guy from the radio thing. I don't know if I mentioned that. But in his 80-second apology, Doug Williams managed to work in all of the big 3, saying sorry to a list of people that does not include the alleged victim, a reference to how hard this is for him, and a mention of all the women he's related to. He also did that thing where he left out the key component of explaining what it is exactly that he's sorry for. This is how these things go now. Every time. There's a formula. Just look at Kareem Hunt's interview with Lisa Salters on Sunday.
I just really want to, apologize to everybody, the Chiefs organization, my family, and close friends. I just thought of myself as being, just not me. That's not me. I was raised better than that, like I said, and I'm not the type of person to, ever even think about putting my hands on anyone, a woman, a girl, it doesn't matter. My mother raised me right. I was raised by my mom and my grandma.
Oh, did he say grandma? Bingo! Sorry. Look, I get it. No one wants to talk about this so we don't. We talk around it. We say the key words we know we're supposed to say, and then we're all thrilled when someone tells us it's okay to just move on now. But every time we repeat this cycle, we lose a little bit more of the actual substance of what's going on here. It's like socks in the laundry. At this point, we are so far removed from the actual issue that these suspensions regarding off-the-field assault are being treated by teams as yardsticks for fair treatment within the league without a hint of understanding how tone-deaf that is. Case in point, Jerry Jones, a guy who was very vocal in opposing the NFL's 6-game suspension for his star running back Ezekiel Elliott over allegations of domestic violence last season. He was asked this week if he was paying attention to how the league is handling the Kareem Hunt situation. And he said he's, quote, keeping a very close eye and have a very keen interest in how this plays out. It's a challenging area of what we're about. Everyone has zero tolerance for domestic abuse. Brave. The thing is, well, actually, there's a couple things. For one, Kareem Hunt's case, not a domestic abuse case. He didn't know the woman. Those words mean stuff, although I'm probably wasting my time arguing the meaning of words with a guy who once described nitpicking as, quote, circumcising the mosquito. Second thing, just real quick, read just one piece of literature on domestic abuse, and you'd know that zero tolerance policies don't work. But most importantly, Jerry, you seemed pretty north of zero tolerance not too long ago. So enough. I think my resignation in general comes from this realization that everyone is just saying words and nobody cares what they mean. It isn't about being transparent, it's about looking like you care and then going back to stuff you actually care about. Either care or don't, but don't make us do this very long and exhausting charade every time. I want to believe it's not all lip service, I do. The Ray Rice incident in 2014 was supposed to be, and has often been labeled as, a turning point for the NFL. So, in an effort to get away from the desensitizing cycle of regurgitated takes and familiar patterns, I decided I would dig in on this part, the action. Where are we now with all those promises the league made after Ray Rice? There are a few tangible things that happened in 2014 among the sea of press releases put out by the NFL. One of them was the creation of the NFLPA's new Commission on Violence Prevention, a group of 11 people from outside industries who would work together to propose actionable steps that could be made from within the organization to address the issue. 2 of the 11 members had professional experience in dealing with domestic violence. Deborah Epstein, co-director of Georgetown University Law Center's Domestic Violence Clinic, and Susan Else, former president of the National Network to End Domestic Violence. So 4 years later, how's it going?
The Players Association created a committee to combat abuse, but now 2 members of that group have walked out because they say it's not doing anything.
In a Washington Post op-ed, Georgetown law professor Deborah Epstein says she was thrilled to join the commission to study and rectify the NFL's domestic violence epidemic.
The most disappointing thing was that every idea that I brought to the NFL Players Association, they talked about embracing, but ultimately let die on the vine.
I actually reached out to Deborah Epstein yesterday, thinking surely she was too busy to get back to me given everything going on this week and her connection to the NFL. She wasn't. She called me back right away. Deborah told me that while she was immensely disappointed in the NFLPA's lack of action, there was a huge red flag early on that she missed. At the end of the commission's first meeting, they were told to pretend to keep working because TV crews were going to come in and film them. At the time, she figured, hey, they want to get good press. Weird, but ultimately harmless. Now, of course, her perspective on it has changed. She told me, quote, let them get good press for engaging in a meaningful effort to fight domestic violence. The problem was, of course, that all they wanted was meaningful press. Epstein did accomplish something in her time there, a year-long study that she and Lisa Goodman, a Boston College research psychologist with experience working with survivors of intimate partner violence, completed in 2016. Epstein says the NFLPA was instrumental in helping her and Goodman gain access to the wives and girlfriends of current and former players who they engaged with through a series of focus groups. So they ended up with a bunch of consistent findings that they then turned into steps for the league to take. But the NFLPA didn't take them. And thanks to a confidentiality agreement, we can't see that study. The second thing the league emphasized in the wake of Ray Rice was educational programs. In March of 2015, the NFL made public a webinar version of their domestic violence program that they had made mandatory the year before for league and club office personnel, owners, coaches, and players. I looked at it. A description of the course said the goal of the presentation was to create a better understanding of domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse. It was like 26 minutes long and fairly basic, with the domestic violence discussion centering mainly on the role of a bystander and what they can do to prevent such situations. So not great, but it was year one. I also found the presentation for year 2 of the program, 2016. The description of that course said the goal of the presentation was to create a better understanding of domestic violence, sexual assault, and DUI. One of those things doesn't really fit, but that's fine. The most recent available version of the course from 2017 states that the goal is to create a better understanding of domestic violence, sexual assault, DUI, and firearm safety. It only took 2 years for this initiative to become a catch-all for distractions. Cool. So the third big thing that came from the Ray Rice scandal was that the NFL hired a bunch of women, one of which being Lisa Friel, the former head of the sex crimes prosecution unit in the New York County District Attorney's Office, as a senior advisor to help with the league's investigations and discipline process. Friel is now the senior vice president special counsel for investigations. And like many of the other women hired by the league to fix the mess they made, she's been subject to criticism from fans as well as scrutiny of her past actions with the DA's office. There's a lot to unpack there. We're not going to get into all of it. I didn't even want to do this in the first place. But what I wanted to know for the sake of this conversation, here in 2018, if there was ever a discussion by Friel herself of what the league's actual process is when it comes to these investigations. And it turns out there is. Friel was a speaker at the 2017 Current Issues in Sports Law Symposium at UVA Law, her alma mater, and there she clearly outlined the 4 steps the NFL takes when carrying out their investigations.
When we do our investigations, that is the first thing we do, reach out for the alleged victim. The second thing we do is reach out for law enforcement. And so a lot of times what I'm saying is, do me a favor, if you won't give it to me now, police reports, 911, surveillance video, just get it. I know that at that club there's a surveillance video, or outside that restaurant there's a surveillance video because I sent one of my investigators and we asked for it and we were told, sure, just bring us back a subpoena. So we can't get it from them, but please go get it. So we do that. So that's to outreach to the alleged victim, outreach to law enforcement, outreach to private entities, and of course the fourth outreach that we have to engage in is to the alleged perpetrator, to the accused person.
So alleged victim, law enforcement, private entities, the accused. Again, I know I keep saying this, that all sounds great. Anytime you can lay out a numbered list of action steps, I immediately feel better. It's how I remember to execute my plan for going to the gym. But what isn't adding up to me, I guess, is like, when do these steps start?
The league had the police report back in February. The player, Kareem Hunt, spoke to the Chiefs about the incident. The league spoke to the Chiefs about the incident. But after reviewing the police report and talking to the player, everybody decided to do nothing. The league, in its investigation of Kareem Hunt, never interviewed Kareem Hunt and never interviewed the woman involved.
Then that's not an investigation.
Great point, not an investigation. By their own standards that their VP set. It's like telling somebody that you made soup and then serving them a bowl of hot water with like a list of instructions on how to make soup in it. I don't know what that is, but it's not soup. Please trust me when I say, I understand this is tough to talk about. I know you don't want to. I don't know how to make it more clear that I don't want to either. But there is a large portion of us sports fans that can't just turn off the part of us that these headlines affect. I fear the only thing the NFL has learned over the last few years is how to deliver the right lines and update their rosters to quell the frustrations of their fan base. It's not good enough. I'm sorry. You have the resources. You know the people. Listen to them. Coaches, read some articles on what's truly at the heart of the issue. Conveniently enough, they're on sports blogs now because they have to be. If you don't know where to start, I would recommend anything written by Diana Moskovitz at Deadspin. There are a ton of excellent writers putting in work to cover this subject properly, but that is a good jumping off point. This isn't my job. I want to tell jokes. I have a studio audience staring at me right now and probably hoping for a refund. You didn't know they were here because they haven't laughed. Your words, the things you say, matter. And we, sports fans, hear them. And we know when you mean what you say. Which brings me to the somewhat lighter note I would like to end on, if that's okay. The Chicago Cubs last week tendered the contract of shortstop Addison Russell, who still has 31 games remaining on his 40-game suspension for violating MLB's domestic violence policy. Addison's now ex-wife, Melissa, who had originally declined to participate in the league's investigation into allegations against Russell, eventually did cooperate, in part because investigators demonstrated patience and an understanding of why many women in situations involving domestic abuse do not come forward. This is one case. It certainly doesn't mean that Major League Baseball gets it right all the time. They've made their share of mistakes. But I just want to read a couple excerpts from the very lengthy statements that Addison Russell and Cubs President of Baseball Operations Theo Epstein put out, just because I clicked on this story expecting the usual and was shocked to feel what I believe is a little bit of hope. Okay, so from Addison. I offer my heartfelt apology to my family and my former wife, Melissa, for my past behavior. I accepted my suspension and I did not appeal. I am responsible for my actions. I am complying with the MLBPA treatment plan, and I'll be meeting regularly with different experts, counselors, and therapists. Even before any mandated treatment, I took the extra initiative of obtaining my own therapist, and I've been meeting with that therapist several times a week for the last 2 months and plan to continue this therapy beyond the MLB treatment plan. Then there's this from Epstein. The behavior that led to Addison Russell's suspension under the Major League Baseball's joint domestic violence policy happened on our watch. If we're willing to accept credit when a member of our organization succeeds on the field, what should we do if he engages in conduct off the field worthy of discipline for Major League Baseball? We have chosen to take action to try to become a small part of the solution for Addison, his family, Melissa Reedy, and the larger issue of domestic violence prevention. We've maintained regular dialogue with Melissa to support her and to listen. We've also consulted with a number of domestic violence experts. Today, we are taking the procedural step of tendering Addison a non-guaranteed contract. It does not represent the finish line, nor rubber stamp his future as a Cub. It does, however, reflect our support for him as long as he continues to make progress and demonstrates his commitment to these important issues. I'm almost done, I promise. We understand every action we take and word we use sends a message to our fans, all of whom have their own unique experiences and perspectives, and some of whom have a personal connection to domestic violence. They were longer than that. I just read the parts that to me were shocking, and it was still a very long quote that I just read to you. And sure, all that might mean is that they have great lawyers or an incredible PR team. But at least for the first time in a while, it feels like something.
For more, sign up now for ESPN Plus.